Well, hello, everyone. I hope you like the countdown, makes things a little more exciting. We got colleague Sandra. Sandra, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you, David?
I'm energized because last night we had 200 people together in New York where Sandra and myself are sitting for our Responsible Tech Mixer collaboration with Atlanta Council. There's a lot of what we try to do here at All Tech is Human. So if you're new to All Tech is Human, welcome for this live stream series, or if you've been around a lot, thank you for all this continued support. We couldn't do it without you. We're a nonprofit committed to kind of strengthening this growing responsible tech movement. You say, well, why are we doing this, right? We're doing this so we can tackle wicked tech and society issues and co-create a tech future aligned with the public interest. What you're tuned in for today is all about generative AI. We've got two special guests. We're going to dig into these issues with my colleague, Rebekah Tweed, who you might know, who runs a lot of our programs here at All Tech is Human, such as our Responsible Tech Job Board, talent pool, the new Techalo that we have that takes technologists and puts them with social impact roles, and also our mentorship program. Just had 700 applications, 2 weeks, a lot of enthusiasm because a lot of people, it seems, want to tackle wicked tech and society issues. But Sandra, love to kind of hear about some of what you're working on, and then especially for everyone tuning in. I know we're always looking for continued kind of partnerships, collaborations, all the different kind of orgs that we're building. And I know we also have a lot on the agenda for anybody who is watching right now.
Yeah, that's great, David. Thank you to anyone who's just joining us. My name is Sandra Khalil. I head up partnerships for All Tech is Human. If you're just joining us, it's great to have you. There are so many ways to get involved. Like David mentioned, our mentorship program has some pretty hardcore stats this year. We had 700 people apply and 110 mentors around the world. So shout out to the mentors and the mentees. We're so happy to have you. And yeah, if you're interested in getting involved next year, this is an annual sort of program that we put out for the community free of charge. We also have some events coming up. So if you're interested in seeing us at BetaWorks again after last night's success, our next event is July 26th in New York City, BetaWorks. And we're also hosting another panel and mixer in San Francisco on August 2nd. And then we have two summits coming up in the fall. So one is in partnership with the Canadian Consulate in New York City on September 14th. So that'll be on the sidelines of UNGA with some really robust programming before and after to make it like a really comprehensive responsible tech week, you could call it. And then October 25th, we have a Youth Tech and Wellbeing Summit in partnership with the Australian Embassy, some good partners on the Safety by Design, E-Safety Commissioner's Office, and that'll be in DC, obviously. And all of these signups, registrations, interest forms are located on our website. So we'll be posting our link tree and our website, alltechishuman.org. If you want to learn more, get involved. And final plug, we have our Responsible Tech Guide coming out in September, and we just put together our working group. It's very early stages, so if you're interested in getting involved, want to volunteer, be profiled in our Responsible Tech careers section, talk about your trajectory, how you reached your roles. There are so many ways to get involved and amplify the good work that you do. So get in touch with us, and yeah, hope to see you soon.
Well, I'm distracted by all of the great people who are tuning in, and I'm seeing all the cities and the locations.
Yeah.
Sandra, kind of reminds me, one of the things that we also do for anybody kind of tuning in right now is we have a Slack community. The idea there is we can be a connected tissue across civil society, government, industry, academia. And what is kind of unique about All Tech is Human is we like to mix the emerging with the established, right? So whether you are a college student, a career changer, pivoting into this space, anybody from all different disciplines, all different backgrounds across the globe, we're looking to connect, to learn from each other, to share best practices, and to build community. So on our Slack group, which you can join, it's all on our link tree, which is on our website, that we'll also share in the chat. We have over 5,000 members across 70 countries and growing, do regular summits and mixers, the mentorship program we talked about, and so much more. join the working group that we currently have going on, or if that doesn't fit your speed, later on, we usually have chosen topics around our key areas like responsible AI that we're discussing today, but also public interest technology, trust and safety, tech and democracy, and youth, tech, and well-being. But without further ado, I think we'll turn it over to the main task at hand, Sandra. So we're just going to jump off screen and we'll bring on Rebekah, who's going to introduce the special guest that we have for today. And everybody, thank you for sharing kind of the location that you're at, but also start sharing some of the questions. Rebekah went through some of the submissions that we've already had if you signed up through Eventbrite. So we have a bunch of those questions kind of teed up. And then at about 10 minutes before we end, 10 or 15 minutes before we end, we're going to bring up some of the submitted kind of questions through the chat. So feel free to use those chats to submit your questions or any comments that we'll try to bring up on screen as well. And thank you so much for participating. And don't be a stranger. Get involved, whether it's in person or virtually. We like to build community, and that's how we're going to do this. We need a collective vision and movement if we're going to really tackle these hard problems that we're faced, like generative AI that we're discussing today. So Sandra, I will see you around the office and kick you off today. Hey, how's it going, Rebekah?
Hi, David. How are you?
I'm doing well, but I'm not going to give you the long answer because we're going to get right to it. So I'm just going to jump off.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. So welcome. Incredibly excited to be having this conversation today. We have Triveni Gandhi and Ravit Dotan. I have the privilege of moderating today's discussion. So I am Rebekah Tweed. I'm the program director at All Tech is Human. This is the third in our generative AI live stream series. We try to parse the ongoing hype around generative AI. We try to identify new areas of emerging tangible harm and dissect the potential impacts on the broader responsible tech ecosystem. So for the All Tech is Human community, but just really for all of us who are concerned about these issues. So I'm thrilled to introduce our guests. So joining me today, we have Triveni Gandhi, PhD. Triveni is a Jill of all trades data scientist, thought leader, and advocate for the responsible use of AI, who likes to find simple solutions to complicated problems. As responsible AI lead at Dataiku, she builds and implements custom solutions to support the responsible and safe scaling of AI. This includes hands-on training to put responsible AI principles into practice, as well as change management programs that help business leaders translate ethical values into actionable indicators. Triveni also supports field product teams with innovative methods to govern and oversee complex AI problems, often serving as a technical bridge between subject matter experts and engineers. Triveni is the winner of VentureBeat's Women in AI Awards in the category of Responsibility and Ethics in AI, and was listed as one of the 100 Brilliant Women in AI Ethics in 2022. She holds a PhD in political science from Cornell University. We are also joined today by Ravit Dotan, PhD, an AI ethics advisor, researcher, speaker, and content creator. So Ravit's specialty is helping tech companies, investors, and procurement professionals develop responsible AI approaches. You can find Ravit's content on her website and LinkedIn page, which I highly recommend. Ravit holds a PhD in philosophy from UC Berkeley, and she has been featured by publications such as New York Times, CNBC, and TechCrunch. All right, welcome to both of you. I love it. We have a political scientist and a philosopher. This is great. So just for a little
we're not going to talk about either of those things.
Right. Yes. So for a little bit of background, we have started this series of live streams, and we're trying to separate this kind of breathless hype from the reality and the real world harms of generative AI. So we launched this series a couple of months ago. We had Dr. Ruman Chowdhury and Elizabeth Ranieris. And then last month we had Dr. Brandeis Marshall and Reed Blackman, and each speaking to different aspects of this emerging space. But there are still so many facets of this fast-moving topic that need to be addressed. We continue to see this onslaught of things to read and digest regarding developments in generative AI, especially as the regulatory environment heats up, which is great. But it can feel like it's a full-time job to keep up with all of the news and developments. So we know for our audience, this is a topic of conversation that's very much of interest. And we really appreciate both of you helping our community continue to make sense of generative AI, how it affects us, and the responsible tech ecosystem. So today, I'm hoping the audience leaves with a better understanding of how responsible AI practitioners who are leading teams and advising companies are approaching generative AI. So we have a lot to talk about, so I'm going to jump right in here. And I want to start the conversation with you, Triveni. I want to kick things off by having you tell us about your work at Dataiku and how generative AI is affecting and changing your work building responsible AI products. So for instance, how did you approach responsible AI at Dataiku when you released a new version of your product, so Dataiku 12, which incorporates GPT-4? So I'm curious, what were the challenges and what changes did you make, or how did you approach a new version that incorporates generative AI?
Yeah, first of all, thanks so much for having me here. I love this community. I think it's so great. And it's really cool to be on screen with Ravit, of all people, who's like a LinkedIn superstar for all this great content.
No.
Yeah.
Let me intervene here. The superstars here, like seriously, is all tech is human. Okay,
Yeah.
resume.
Anyway, yeah, so just before answering your question, Rebekah, Dataiku, for those of you who don't know, is an end-to-end data science platform, right? Or, AI platform that allows people to connect to any data anywhere in their ecosystems, be able to ingest it, clean it up, prepare it, build models, deploy those models, and now govern them as well, and really be able to include governance of your entire system from the beginning and not like as an afterthought at the end. So it's like I said, I'm a Jill of all trades data scientist. This is a jack of all trades tool to let you do everything in that pipeline in one centralized place. So that said, then that of course raises the sort of like bar for us in terms of wanting to make sure what we're providing to our users is a tool that can let them get the most value out of their AI while minimizing risks. So specifically on the Gen AI side, last week we announced the release of a lot of really interesting new use cases that have been built using our platform, especially GPT-4, as well as a couple of new interesting features that are coming out around prompt engineering. And my work specifically was a big part of that, right? It wasn't like, hey, we're doing all this cool stuff with Gen AI, and then 2 minutes before launch, Triveni, by the way, can you do something here? We took a very direct and like concerted effort to incorporate these principles from the beginning, right? And so not only did we release all of these use cases, we released a framework, a way of thinking about how to actually approach Gen AI that is both similar and dissimilar from how we think about responsible AI broadly. We released a responsible AI training and practice series, which is now available for anyone who wants to take it. And then each of those use cases were reviewed by our responsible AI team to assess sort of what is the expected impact of this kind of use case? What are the kinds of considerations you need to take into account? What are the specific risks from the use of such a model in the real world? And I guess I can say this now. There were even a couple of use cases that came up where myself and the team were like, no, we're not making this use case. It's not okay. And that's the kind of thinking that needs to get incorporated earlier on and not at the like, oh, oops, we shouldn't have done that stage.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Ravit, I want to turn to you now to hear about what your work is as an AI ethicist. And I'm especially interested in the governance guidelines that you produce and how generative AI has affected your work and how it's changed in light of the widespread access to these new tools.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Rebekah. Also, many accolades from me to all of you. I am so happy to be here today. Okay, to your question, Rebekah. Yeah. So I focus on how can we help tech companies, especially, develop and deploy AI more responsibly. When I say AI, I mean it in a very broad way: AI, machine learning, big data, whatever. I don't care because they all share very similar risks. And I do that by focusing on two questions. One is the how question. What should companies do in terms of their governance? How can they increase their maturity when it comes to responsible AI? So what does a journey look like for a company to develop from being less mature to more mature? What interventions can help And what are some benchmarks? So what is the industry currently doing? These are all questions that I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about how companies can become more responsible. The other question is why? How can we create motivation for those companies to do that? Regulation is, of course, really important for motivation, but it's not the only thing. Money is also helpful for motivation building. So I am looking at the various ways that money is funneled to companies that develop and deploy AI, investment, procurement, insurance. All of those financial actors are pushing money into AI systems. So how can we help those financial actors be more involved in funding AI responsibly? So this is a universe of issues that I'm thinking about, and I'm doing it under various professional hats. I do academic research. Sign up to participate in my research. If you work at a tech company, go to my website. I'm looking for interviewees. Okay, so I do this research, but I also just work hands-on with companies and investors and procurement people. And one of the companies that I work with right now, I mean, I've been working with them for a year, but you asked, Rebekah, how generative AI impact my work. Well, I'm working with a generative AI company. Their name is Bria.ai, and they have image generation. So I've been working with them for a year now. And now, of course, with the hype and the boom, it does really, I don't know how to describe it, but definitely impacts. Yeah, so I work in the private sector. That's the second thing. And then the third thing is content creation, because I think one of the things that is really important is to get people talking about this topic, to get people understanding, asking the right kind of questions. There's a real barrier of understanding and non-hype conversations. So that's why one of the things I try to do by just creating content and engaging with people.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I like how you're speaking to the different motivators, and yeah, money is a big one. I do want to take a moment to spend a little more time on the governance part of it. So Triveni, I wanted to talk to you about the government regulations, the process of regulating technology. It seems to move at a very glacial pace through a labyrinth of government bodies and committees, but it is moving at this point, and generative AI seems to have really sent things into overdrive. Just recently, we saw President Biden convene experts that included Algorithmic Justice League's Joy Buolamwini, and that's very promising for proponents of responsible AI to have her at the table. And then in the U.S. Congress, we had the Science, Space, and Technology Committee hearing recently that included testimony from Dr. Ruman Chaudhary and the CEO of Hugging Face, among others. And then Senator Chuck Schumer is indicating some interest in the topic. So I'm really wondering, Triveni, how does this impact your work? So how are you impacted by the regulatory considerations and recent moves by the US, but also the EU's AI Act? And are you keeping an eye on anything in particular? Or are there any forms of governmental guidance that are more useful to you and your work?
Yeah, so if regulations are glaciers, right? Like ChatGPT is like the climate crisis that's like speeding up the glaciers, melting into heat. So I think that for sure, we've gotten a whole new layer of, or a whole new area of excitement that's popped up. For us specifically, right? There's one element of the work or the software that we build wanting to stay compliant with whatever regulations and standards might be out there. That's something that we work with our product team, our legal team, our compliance sort of teams to build those aspects into the platform. But then even broader than that is how we're helping our customers do it, right? Because they're using our tool to do AI, right? Even if it's their data, if it's their AI, we don't touch that, but they're using our tool still. And we want to help them do that in the way that's most effective. So a couple of things we've done. I mentioned earlier something called the Govern node, right? This is our centralized sort of registry of all your projects, all your models, everything that's happening. And we've actually built blueprints that correlate with different standards orgs and things like the EU AI Act. So if, though the EU AI Act is not yet live, I guess you could say, we've gone ahead and built a blueprint so that customers who want to start getting aligned now, even before it's becoming enforced, they can actually incorporate that methodology into their development process and keep an eye on it. I've built a similar one. So the EU AI Act was built by my colleagues in Europe. And then I built one for the NIST framework that allows you to actually incorporate elements of NIST. And so I think the way we're approaching it is that we don't know what the regulations are going to look like. We don't know who's going, the final regulation is going to look like. And when you're dealing with regulated industries, there's a different layer of concern. When you're dealing with just sort of state versus local versus federal versus world, there's all these different layers, and we want to be prepared to help our customers reach any layer of that. And that's what our tool is about, is helping you be as flexible and ready for whatever's coming by incorporating it, like I said, earlier into the pipeline, making it a central part of your workflow.
Yeah, that's great. And Ravit, a few months ago, I want to say, there was a LinkedIn post that you made that I really resonated with. And you were saying something to the effect of that public pressure is crucial because regulation and enforcement are lagging behind. So let's make responsibility concerns an integral part of this public conversation. And I really love that. It feels like, that is a major potential upside of the kind of hype cycle around generative AI, because it presents this opportunity for the responsible AI community. And I wonder, do you think that it is working to affect the regulatory environment, and what regulatory advances are you seeing that look most promising to you, or that you are most interested in? And then beyond that, what could the impact of public pressure be beyond inspiring greater regulatory action?
Thanks. Yeah, I think public pressure is absolutely key. I think AI responsibility is a very political issue, like other political issues. And the reason is it affects how we organize society. It affects our life in the public domain. So, if it affects the distribution of goods, it affects the distribution of opportunities. These are classically, traditionally political topics, and we need to talk about them and put pressure, because that does eventually help regulators to be more active. And I think AI ethics needs to be perceived in a similar way. It is a topic that influences our shared life. It is deeply political. It needs to be a part of the political conversation. We have an election coming up in the US. Yes, we do need to know the opinions of our representatives on this topic. One very depressing thing that I'm seeing right now. So I'm currently writing a paper on US AI regulation. For the paper, I'm actually going over all of the bills, the federal bills and the state level bills about AI. What was the content? What happened to them? Most of them get rejected, and it's super depressing because I'll see a bill. It's like, oh my God, yeah, I want this bill. I want it. Rejected. And some of them are pretty basic, especially the earlier ones. They're like, we should track how jobs are impacted. Rejected. Why? I think the more conversations we have about it in the public domain, the more regulators understand that this is something that we expect to see activism about. And I think the recent hype, is it a coincidence that we've been seeing those Senate hearings in the US? I don't think so. I really don't. Is it a coincidence that we're seeing big tech companies talking to regulators about this? No. Why? Because they're pressured by the public. So it does make a huge difference. And as I'm seeing, it's not that there's lack of initiatives that the regulators are trying, but they don't get enough support from the other regulators. So if our elected officials know that actually, yeah, your constituents, we care. We expect you to do something about this. This is a big hypothetical, but if the democratic system is working well, it should have an impact. Yes, qualifying that this is a hypothetical. So, I think it's absolutely crucial, especially now that a lot of the hype is focusing on issues that are non-issues, let's call them. It's really important to get back to focusing on real concrete things that impact our society, rather than, just like science fiction, doomsday scenarios that really don't pertain to anything. Really key. And Now I want to expand to other kind of actors. So I've mentioned that I'm especially interested in investors and creating motivation for companies. You know, the language of that world is the language of money, often, not always, but often, and things that matter to them. You know, when I speak to them and I try to explain, hey, you know, yes, doing things in a socially responsible way is important for social reasons, but actually it's also important for your business case. It's also important for your competitiveness. Why? And some of the reasons are reputational risk. It's something that does and should concern companies and investors. But reputational risk only works if people care. If when something happens, people are outraged. So they need to express dissatisfaction when a company is caught red-handed doing something they shouldn't, or like having some awful ramification. So this public conversation really important for this reputational aspect. Also, there are a lot of statistics about product adoption and like brand loyalty to companies that have more like they care about social impact issues. We need to show that. So we need to start being more informed consumers, start asking questions, start expressing our dissatisfaction if in fact they don't tell me their data, you know, policy, if they don't let me have access to my data, if they don't show me that they've done anything to see if their algorithm is going to work on people like me. You know, so this can have an effect that way too. So for like reputational risk, that's one. And for informed consumerism, which like impacts the money. And the third thing that really matters is talent attraction, especially for startups. Often they can't compete money-wise with the big companies, but they still want to get the top talent. We have a lot of statistics showing that people prefer working for companies that do have, I don't know, ethics in mind, I'm not sure how to call it, but let's act on it. When we interview, yes, let's ask them a question about this. It's how things are getting funneled into the company in various levels. If I'm actually not going to take a job offer because I'm disappointed with their ethics approach, tell them, by the way, I find this not up to par, you know? So, and all of these things are facilitated by public conversations.
Yeah, Robert, I completely agree. Especially your last point around talent attraction, I see that as well. So thank you for that. So Triveni, I want to get your take on the fact that some companies are banning chatbots or generative AI, like Samsung, even temporarily. Not wanting to put trade secrets into a large language model. And I want to know if you're seeing a lot of this yourself. Do any of your customers ban the technology, or how are they reacting to Dataiku version 12 that includes GPT-4? And have there been any issues with adoption? And if so, what would you say to address those concerns? Or do you think they're founded or unfounded?
Right. Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. A lot of the banning has come because it was like no one knew what was going on or how it was working, and everyone just rushed towards it. And then as a result, there was all these sort of like negative consequences, and companies started kind of dialing it back a bit. I think it's interesting. You know, I get a lot of requests for conversations with clients who really want to use this technology because they understand that there are some value add, right? From things like, you know, okay, leave aside the sort of crazy use cases, if you will, but like things like document search. So a customer support representative can more easily access like core technical material and get an answer out to their, to their end user faster. Or even like text summarization of really lengthy kind of contracts and being able to pinpoint this aspect here seems off or not, right? And these are all use cases that can be really valuable. And so our customers are coming to us and saying, we want to do this really valuable stuff, but we are also worried about all these other potential consequences. Help us figure out guardrails. Help us figure out how to put a frame around this so that we're using it in the right way. And oftentimes it's really a matter of first saying, what are your actual, guardrails? What are your no-goes? What is actually going to be a problem for you? Is it that you're using corporate documents that you don't want leaking out into the world? Is it that you're using personal information on your clients and you don't want that to be used in a biased or skewed way? figuring that out and then building the use case to incorporate those guardrails. So a lot of times it also relates to the architecture you're using. Are you using the ChatGPT interface? Because then for sure your data is getting sent back to OpenAI. Or are you calling the API through a subscription service that has given you the assurance that your data is not being shared back to the model training? So there's a lot of things to consider. And I think that what we're seeing is that, especially when we released this new version and we've included ChatGPT, or not ChatGPT, but GPT-4, right? It is about saying, look, this is technology that you can get a lot of value out of, but here's how you're going to need to think about it to get the maximum value at the minimum risk level.
Yeah, yes. And corporate risk is one big and legitimate area of potential harm. And I want to talk about some other areas of harm. So it seems that the recent coverage of generative AI has focused on a lot of other emerging potential harms to society more broadly. So I've seen a lot of coverage of disinformation campaigns that have been supercharged by generative AI. I've also seen coverage of the potential for an AI feedback loop, leading to model collapse in a large language model, where there's progressive distortion and eventual loss of minority data characteristics, which obviously compounds the problem of bias. And there's been some, frankly, horrific coverage of not only deep fake revenge porn, but also child sexual abuse material, or CSAM, that has been created using generative AI. So Ravit, I wanted to turn the conversation to you. You've been asked a lot about various harms of generative AI in different articles and podcasts and media appearances recently. And of all that you've recently spoken about or been asked about regarding Gen AI, you've talked about some really important potential areas of harm, like labor impacts and workforce issues, deep fakes and disinformation, especially in the lead up to a US election. The impacts on academia with student plagiarism and cheating and things like that. And then also like the environmental impacts of chatbots. So I'm curious, what potential harm that's caused by generative AI concerns you the most today?
Yeah, okay, it's a difficult question to answer because different, like, who do you love more, like mom or dad? But I want to use this time to maybe highlight a risk that I just think is not discussed enough. So not that it's necessarily more important than others, but it's not getting enough of the spotlight, I think. So when people talk about disinformation, they typically will talk about it in political contexts, maybe like, oh, we can have politicians portrayed doing things that they haven't done, like other kinds of fraud. Is when people talk about misinformation and disinformation, often that is the context. There's another context that I want to highlight, the academic context. So I'm hearing a lot of academics saying that they want to use large language models to quote unquote do shortcuts. So, oh, can I write my literature review with this? Can I write my grant proposal with this? I get it. It's maybe tempting, but there's a huge risk here, because if when that summary is being produced, false information is getting inserted into it, backed by false citations to people and papers that do not exist, to experiments that never happened, to historical facts that never occurred, then it's not just one paper. Like, the risk here is really kind of undermining the entire scientific endeavor. So we have a corpus of knowledge that is supposed to be, theoretically the most stable or something, the most secure. This tool can undermine all of that. So we can have papers that are sprinkled with just false facts. They're supposed to underlie everything, right? Sociology, medicine. What if it's all sprinkled with AI-generated misinformation? To me, that's a really, really terrifying effect. That could have long-lasting effects. Like, how long will it take to sift through like the entirety of like decades of information that's going to have like false facts in it? To me, that's really, really terrifying, because the ramifications are really unimaginable. I guess, like, also unutterable to emphasize.
Yeah, that's a really excellent point, and something that I had not thought very deeply about. So, okay, it looks like our time is drawing to a close here. So I do want to turn a little bit to some of the questions we've received from folks in the audience. And we also had some submitted during registration. So let's see, it looks like right now we have from Conrad, given the pace of the AI arms race, is it possible for regulatory efforts to ever not be lagging behind? Do either of you want to take that one?
Yeah, well, I'll say that it depends on what you're regulating. Are you regulating the actual technology or are you regulating the use cases? In which case, if you're regulating the use cases, you can stay abreast of it, right? Like, yes, okay, we didn't have like this concern around foundation models as prominent a year and a half ago. So the regulations weren't thinking about that, but they were thinking about what does it mean to be in a high risk situation or a low risk situation. And those are the kinds of things that are going to actually, I don't want to say easier to regulate, but are going to be more tangible to regulate and be able to say, okay, if you're building something that can be used in this way, or if you've built something and you're using it to do XYZ, right? That's a problem. We need to regulate that, right? And I think that it's actually no different than the way that we regulate financial services. You know, financial services are not using fancy models for the most part, right? But we are regulating, how did you protect the consumer when you built this model? How did you protect the data? How does the consumer have a right to know or a way to recourse? That's where we can stay abreast, is if we're thinking about the use cases. The technology, regulating that technology is really like a different beast almost. And I don't think that regulators alone can do it. I think you need to involve standards organizations. You need to involve academia. You need to involve the actual like builders. And that's a different like subset of conversations.
I like that. And maybe I'll just add to that. Yes, regulating the technology alone is guaranteed to have regulation lagging behind, because first the technology needs to exist and then it can be regulated. So by definition, it will lag behind. In addition to regulating the use cases, I would add regulating the checks or guardrails when engaging with a technology. For example, today, one of the bills, it's not a law, that I was reviewing is about, which state was it? But when the state procures AI, it must, first of all, do an internal audit that they do. And it needs to assess specifically discrimination issues. I mean, they go even further. They say, yeah, we're gonna do an inventory of all the AI that state government is using here, and then we're gonna check. And if we're gonna buy anything else, we're gonna do this check as well. So here it's regulating the gate of what enters the gate and what kind of checks we are going to do. And I think that could be helpful as well. And another thing that could be helpful to make sure that regulation does not stay behind is regulating what companies should do, right? Maybe I want to require that the company does an impact assessment and also makes it, submits it to me, the state, and also makes it publicly available. Then, like, if they came up with a technology that's really innovative and it's different, great. It just means that I'm going to expect really innovative impact assessment from them.
Yeah, that's a great point. Let's see, we do have another question from, let's see, this came through our Eventbrite registration, and it says, what are practices that early stage founders should take to mitigate AI related harms?
First, ask yourself, what are you doing with AI? Do you really need it? Are you actually using AI because you need it, or because I have a startup that I sort of advise, and the CEO called me and said, well, we want to put like AI in there. Can we like look at the slide? I put like AI, and I was like, what AI? What's your AI here? Oh, well, what's the data you're using? Well, we don't really have any data yet. So where's your AI? I was like, this is a business model. This is a rules model. It's not AI. Do not put this on your slide. And like, if you want to get investors and all that, and like get them to buy in because it's AI, any good investor is going to see right through you. So first understand, am I actually using AI? Do I really need to use AI for this use case? And then, okay, what are the harms here that I need to think about? Who's going to be impacted? Are the people that I'm going to be using this product on, are they involved in this conversation, right? Am I building a facial recognition app and I'm not inviting any people of color or women or anyone who's going to be actually harmed by this to the table? These are the kinds of very common sense questions to ask. I think that's just it's just baseline kind of things.
I will add to that. As you're focusing on early stage founders, one of the common themes I hear from them is, it's too early for me to be thinking about that. This is for later. So I would like to convey to early stage founders, this is almost certainly false. If you try to tack on ethics issues at the end, first of all, you'll never do it. You'll keep postponing it forever and ever. But also there's a huge risk that it will actually be counterproductive. Of course, it's going to be wasteful of time and money, but also researchers have shown, there's a specific study I have in mind. If you slap on the ethics later, if you slap on, bias mitigation as an add-on to your system, it can actually result in more discrimination. So it may just not work. Having said that, you don't have to do everything on day one. That is okay. What I would like to see from founders are two things. First of all, incorporate thoughts of social responsibility into the building aspects of your business. So especially when you are trying to understand your market fit. So when you do your customer discovery and you talk to your prospective customers, also ask them questions about their concerns and about their opportunities, right? Here's an example. Suppose you're building a robot that can replace people in various tasks. Why don't you find the tasks that don't have enough people doing them instead of tasks in which you're going to replace people? You're going to figure out what those things are by talking to them. So talk to your prospective customers. That will help you understand their risks in a way that goes beyond just, armchair thinking. So that's the first step. Incorporate it into your feedback loops, I guess. Second thing that I would like to see from founders, have a plan. So you don't need to do everything on day one. That is okay. But know when is the milestone when you're going to do X or Y, right? So maybe you don't need your ethics principles, your AI ethics principles right now. That's okay. But say to yourself, have it written down in your to-do list or however you keep your things. When thing X happens, that triggers me doing AI ethics principle. So an ethics review or, have a plan.
Yeah, excellent. So we always run up against the clock on these. So let me just throw this one final question out here from Roger. It says, I'm less concerned about the benefits of AI in liberal democracies than I am about how we protect ourselves from its misuse by malevolent actors in rogue jurisdictions. Is anyone thinking about this?
Regulators are thinking about this. Now I feel because the past few days have been nonstop reading bills. Actually, it's one of the topics that regulators are more concerned about. Trying to regulate that specifically when it's coming through social media. Laws are not passing. The bills are not passing because none of them are. But I know that regulators do have this in mind.
But also at the same point, AI is not new in the rogue actors have been messing with other people for years, right? Cambridge Analytica, 2016 US elections, getting the electrical grid shut off in certain places. This is not new, okay? What is still likely to hurt you more on a day-to-day basis are the real harms from AI that are unseen, right? You're not getting access to credit, good credit because of an AI system, or you're not getting those discounts on your cell phone bill because the company's determined that, oh, they're not really going to churn anyway, so don't give them a discount. Or the way people are again, the facial recognition example, things like that. Those are actually real things that are happening right now. And yeah, rogue actors and malevolent use of AI is coming up, but at the same point, it's not at the same level of what's happening to you today that you're not even aware of.
I want to add to that. there's an unfortunate thing that happens in the space of AI ethics. There are camps. I get it, but also it's disappointing. There's a camp that calls itself long-termism, and they think that they are the only ones who are thinking about long-term effects. And they think that when we talk about the kind of things that Triveni just mentioned, like discrimination, well, these are not long-term things. These are like near-term, which like, do you insinuate like short-sighted? So that's one camp. And I can see also some people thinking, oh, yeah, we really need to worry about what malevolent users are thinking, or like foreign countries. And I can see that as emerging as a separate camp, especially given the bills that I'm seeing. And I wanna point attention to the fact that the kind of mitigation steps that people often talk about actually protect us from all of them. So there's no need to necessarily separate between, oh, what are we going to do to defend from, foreign governments, or like, what am I going to do to defend from like sci-fi robots? It's actually the same things that we've been talking about anyways. So if we're talking about disinformation that may happen on social media, especially from foreign actors, like, yes, it definitely may happen. It is one more reason to mark synthetic content in a really effective way. And so we can't afford to dismiss any of those concerns, because they all come together. And if we dismiss one, actually, they all come down together.
Yeah, great point. So I want to respect everyone's time. We are going to draw this to a close. I want to thank our guests today, Triveni Gandhi and Ravit Dotan, for just helping make sense of things, this evolving landscape of generative AI. I want to thank everyone for joining the discussion today and for chiming in with questions. I want to encourage everyone to check out their websites. You can follow up with everyone on social media, and definitely want to do one final plug for Ravit's LinkedIn page. It has so many just really useful resources and commentary about responsible AI. So I personally visit regularly. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and you can keep up with all of us on social media. So thanks everyone for joining us today.
Thank you.